It was Halloween last year when I moved to the city. I was excited to find a party. I thought maybe I'd meet some new people too. I lived in my rundown apartment complex for a few weeks, and the thought of socializing lifted my spirits. Little did I know what a mistake I was making. As I walked into the party, it was packed. Decorations hung from the ceiling, and the laughter echoed in the dim light. I spotted my neighbor, the host, and waved. The air felt cold, and I shivered. The flickering lights made everything seem eerie. I grabbed a drink, hoping it would calm my nerves. I talked to a few guests, but something felt strange. Then I overheard an argument. Two people were talking about someone named Jake. "He didn't come home last year," one said. I froze. I didn't even know who Jake was, but I felt a chill creep up my spine. Maybe I shouldn't have come here. The night dragged on, and the feeling of unease only grew. Guests kept disappearing. They'd show up, laugh for a moment, and then just vanish. At first, I thought they were just stepping outside or using the bathroom. But as I looked around, my heart raced. I couldn't find anyone I recognized. I needed a break from the chaos. I slipped into a quiet corner. I saw an older man sitting by the window. He had an odd look about him. He muttered to himself, and I couldn't help but listen. 10 disappearances last year, and now it's happening again. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to believe him, but I was scared. I gathered my courage and walked over to him. "What do you mean, what happened?" I asked, my voice shaky. He turned to me, his eyes wide. 10 guests came last year and never returned. Trust me, it's not just a party." Panic crept in. I felt the weight of his words. What if I was next? I wanted to leave, but the door seemed miles away. Everyone around me laughed and danced, oblivious to the disappearances. I thought about Jake and the man's unsettling words. I tried to shake it off. I glanced around again. Even more faces were missing. I felt sick. I caught sight of the man again, but he had vanished. My mind raced. I had to get out of there. I stood up, ready to go. Just then I saw someone standing at the door. They were still, watching me. I blinked, and they were gone. Then a voice called out from behind me. "Emma, where are you going?" My blood ran cold. I turned back, but there was nobody there. The laughter around me turned into a dull roar, and I could hardly think. I needed to escape. I turned to run, but the crowd felt suffocating. I pushed through, panic clawing at my chest. The feeling that something was very wrong was overwhelming. It wasn't just a party, and part of me would never get out. I bolted through the throng of dancing bodies, my heart racing. The laughter felt like needles pricking at my skin. I couldn't focus on anything but the desperate need to escape. I pushed my way to the door, but it felt like moving through molasses. There was a sudden and deafening cheer that drew my attention. I glanced to my left, seeing a group of people gathered around something. Or someone? The glint of something shiny caught my eye. My gut twisted. I had to keep going. Finally, I reached the door. I yanked it open, cold air hitting my face like a slap. I stumbled outside into the night, gasping as I sucked in the crisp air. I turned back to see the party continuing, the lights flickering in a rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. I glanced at my phone, hoping to call for help, but it was dead. Great. Alone. In a city I barely knew. I took a few shaky steps away from the door when a thought sent chills down my spine. What if this wasn't over? What if they were looking for me already? I turned to leave, but something stopped me. My feet seemed glued to the ground. In the shadows, I noticed a figure. My throat went dry. The person was dressed in black, standing still in the corner of the courtyard. I squinted, trying to make out their face. They were watching me. After a moment of hesitation, I took a few cautious steps forward. "Hello?" I called out, my voice quaking. The figure didn't move. Then I heard it. A low whisper that seemed to echo in the air. "You shouldn't have come here." My chest tightened. I turned to run, but the only exit I could see was behind me, back toward that cursed party. I sprinted in the opposite direction, darting down an alley that smelled like garbage. I heard footsteps behind me. They echoed against the brick walls, steady and menacing. Fear surged through me. I picked up speed. I could hear my breathing, quick and shallow, but the footsteps grew louder, closer. I turned a corner and stumbled into a small courtyard, littered with broken bottles and old crates. I could still hear them, faint and rhythmic. I ducked behind a dumpster, praying to fade into the shadows. My heart pounded in my ears, and I pressed my back against the cool metal. I peeked around the corner. Then I saw him, the older man from the party, standing there, looking lost but determined. My instinct screamed at me to run, but something about his expression drew me in. He looked like the only other soul who knew what was going on. "Emma," he called, "get out of sight, they're coming." Before I could act, a chill swept through the alley. The laughter from the party seemed to echo, but it was different this time. Tainted. It sent shivers down my spine. I whipped my head around, and to my horror, shadows crept down the alley, moving as if they had minds of their own. Then everything went dark. I awoke to a murky haze wrapped around me. I blinked hard, trying to shake off the disorientation. I was still crouched behind the dumpster, but the alley was now silent. Too silent. The shadows that had seemed to loom so close just moments before were gone. My heart raced again, and I felt the familiar grip of panic tightening around my chest. "Emma." The man's voice echoed in my memory, and I crawled out from my hiding spot. I didn't know if he'd managed to escape or if he still faced whatever was hunting us. Glancing around, I felt an urge to call out to him, but I knew that wasn't wise. If they were searching the area, yelling would only lead them straight to me. I took a deep breath and stepped away from the dumpster, moving slowly and cautiously. I needed to find a way out, but which direction? The alley forked ahead. One way looked dark and foreboding, while the other was illuminated by flickering light from a distant street lamp. Without thinking, I chose the light, hoping it signaled safety. As I made my way down the alley, uneasy thoughts tangled in my mind. Who was the older man? Why had he warned me? I needed answers, but my instincts told me to keep moving. If I stayed too long in the open, I would be found again. I turned the corner onto the street, and the shift in atmosphere was palpable. The revelry from the party was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. It felt like the city had emptied, all life stripped away, as if some unseen force had swept through and taken everyone with it. Then I froze. Just ahead, something glinted in the dim light. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I cautiously approached it. As I got closer, I realized it was a bracelet, silver, entwined with delicate chains. My stomach dropped. I recognized it. It belonged to one of the girls from the party, Beth. I had seen her earlier, laughing and dancing. An icy fear gripped me. Where was she? What had happened? I slowly stretched my fingers to touch the bracelet, but then I heard it, the faint echo of footsteps approaching. Suddenly I was back in motion, shoving the bracelet in my pocket. I darted into the nearest side street, heart racing as I tried to blend into the shadows. The footsteps grew louder. I pressed myself against the wall, willing myself to disappear. My breath caught as I watched a figure emerge from the shadows on the opposite street. It was him again, the man from before. This time he was accompanied by a group of people, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. They looked frantic, searching, but something in their posture sent chills down my spine. They were not here to help. Then the mad giggling returned, but it wasn't from the party anymore. It echoed, twisting in the air like a taunt. I had to keep moving. My only chance was to get away from them, away from the dark magic that clung to this place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running into something much worse. Just as I turned to slip deeper into the shadows, I heard a voice behind me say, "We found her." My blood ran cold. I took off again, knowing this time I might not escape. I sprinted down the side street, the sound of footsteps behind me growing closer. My lungs burned as I moved, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't dare look back. The world seemed to blur around me. Only the path ahead mattered. I darted into another alley, praying for a way to lose them. The alley was narrower, filled with abandoned furniture and junk. I slid behind a stack of old crates and crouched low, listening intently. The footsteps echoed louder now, booming in my ears, but they didn't pass by. They stopped. I peered through a gap in the crates. The man from before stood at the mouth of the alley, scanning his surroundings. "This way!" he shouted to his companions. Panic washed over me. I was trapped. If I stayed hidden, they might find me. But if I ran, I'd be right in their line of sight. A decision had to be made. I scanned the alley for any possible escape routes. It was then that I noticed a metal door set into the wall, slightly ajar. My breath hitched. It was a risk, but I was out of options. I crept toward the door, praying it wouldn't creak when I pushed it open. I squeezed through, finding myself in a dimly lit room. The air felt stale and heavy, the scent of mildew and decay clinging to the walls. I glanced around quickly. There was no one inside. It was just a storage room stacked with old furniture and broken items, a graveyard for forgotten things. I positioned myself behind a large, overturned table, trying to steady my breath. I needed to think. I wanted to scream, but the sheer terror of that would only draw them closer. Instead, I focused. I imagined Beth, that bracelet sparkling on her wrist, and I felt a pang of guilt. I should have been looking out for her. Now I was in a nightmare, and I had no idea where she was, or if she was even okay. The door creaked open slowly, and I froze. A figure stepped inside. It was a woman, her face hidden beneath a hood. She glanced around the room and then took a few steps inside. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat, but I forced myself to remain quiet. She began searching the room, pulling back furniture, pausing occasionally as if she sensed something. I held my breath, praying she wouldn't come closer. My eyes darted to the door, looking for another exit, but I was trapped. Just then, a loud crash echoed from outside. The woman turned sharply, the moment of distraction giving me the chance I needed. I slipped out from my hiding spot and edged toward the door, trying to make as little noise as possible. The chaos outside grew louder. I squeezed through the door just as the figure looked back in my direction. I bolted away from the sound, heading toward the noise that poured out of another side of the building, desperate to escape this nightmarish game. That's when I saw it, a flash of color in the dark. A streak of movement caught my attention. It was a girl, moving fast, but she didn't look like she was running toward safety. She was running from something. Instinct kicked in, pulling me to follow her. But before I could take a step, the shadows shifted again. Someone was there, blocking my escape. I took a step back, my heart racing. It was a man, tall and imposing. The darkness swallowed his features, but I could see his breath misting in the cool air. My instincts screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The alley was a dead end, and he stood like a wall before me. "Who are you?" I managed to croak, forcing the words past the tightness in my throat. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on me, studying me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The sounds from the chaos nearby faded into a dull roar. I could barely think over the static of fear buzzing in my mind. Part of me wanted to ask if he was one of the ones pursuing me, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't there to help. Suddenly, the girl I'd spotted earlier reappeared, skidding to a stop beside me. In the dim light, I saw a wild look in her eyes, as if she had just escaped a nightmare herself. "Run!" she hissed, grabbing my wrist. Before I could process her words, she pulled me back into the alley. I stumbled, nearly tripping over a piece of debris as I followed her. The man didn't move. He simply watched us, a predatory glint in his gaze. We dashed deeper into the maze of alleys, the silence around us thick except for the sound of our footfalls. I glanced at the girl beside me, her dark hair whipping around her face as we made sharp turns. "Do you know where we're going?" I asked. "Yes," she panted, glancing back as if expecting the man to come after us. "I saw them outside. They're looking for you." "Me? Why?" I had so many questions, but time was slipping away. Beth was somewhere out there, and I couldn't just focus on my own safety. "I can explain later. We need to—" Her words were cut off by a metallic clang ahead. We came to an abrupt halt as we faced a chain-link fence, tall and foreboding. Panic surged through me again. "This way," she shouted, pushing my shoulder toward a gap at the bottom. We dove through, scraping our arms on the rough edges as we landed on the other side. I could hear distant shouts now, voices rising and falling like waves. They were close. The girl pulled me to my feet. "We have to keep moving." As we sprinted down another narrow street, I felt the weight of the evening's chaos bearing down on me. "What's happening? Why are they after me?" "I can't explain right now," she replied, glancing over her shoulder again. "But you're connected somehow. You shouldn't have come here." Confusion swirled in my mind. Connected to what? I wanted to demand answers, but fear clawed at my chest. I shoved the questions aside. Survival came first. Then everything changed. Just as we rounded a corner, I saw a figure ahead, blocking our path. It was another one of them, someone dressed all in black, his face obscured by a mask. Heart pounding, I skidded to a stop, realizing we had nowhere left to run. The girl squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes wide. I felt trapped, and all I could think was how badly I wanted to escape this terrifying game that had turned my life upside down. Just then, the masked figure stepped forward, and the only thing I could manage to do was step back into the shadows, hoping against hope that we wouldn't be seen. My breath caught in my throat as I pressed myself against the rough brick wall, the shadows seamlessly swallowing us whole. The masked figure held a tense stance, every muscle in his body coiled, ready for action. I could hear the girl's soft gasps beside me, but all I could focus on was the looming threat ahead. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, though I felt my heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't sure if I could stay quiet at all with so much fear bubbling inside me. The masked figure remained still, scanning the alley. I felt the urge to bolt, but my legs wouldn't move. The thumping footsteps of the people who were chasing us grew louder, echoing off the walls. It was a haunting reminder that danger was closing in. I could almost hear their frantic shouts calling my name. Then, without warning, the figure lunged toward us, hands outstretched. I yanked on the girl's arm, pulling her back, and we stumbled deeper into the shadows. Just as I thought we'd escaped, a voice rang out, slicing through the air. "Stop. We know you're there." I felt a surge of adrenaline as we took off again. "This way," the girl urged, darting into a narrow side alley that split off from the one we were in. I had no choice but to trust her instincts. The alley was tight, walls looming over us like giants. As we dashed through, I noticed something strange. Faint light flickered at the far end. What was it? A way out? I pushed the thought away. Escaping came first. We turned to the left, plunging down another dark passage. My mind raced. I barely knew this girl, and yet my survival depended on her. "What do they want with me?" I blurted out, desperate for answers. "What's so special about me? I can't explain now," she snapped, glancing back again. "But you're in danger. They believe you have something they need." Before I could ask what that could possibly be, we stumbled out into an open courtyard. The moon hung high, illuminating the gravel under our feet. We paused, panting, scanning for possible escape routes. Just as relief washed over me, I realized the masked figure had followed us. He appeared at the entrance of the alley, silhouetted against the moonlight. I froze, heart racing again. Suddenly, something caught my eye. A group of people was gathered on the other side of the courtyard, lights twinkling from a nearby building. They were laughing and dancing, caught up in their own world, completely unaware of the danger lurking nearby. "Over there," I pointed. The girl's face was a mixture of fear and disbelief. "No, we can't draw attention to ourselves," she hissed, but I felt a flash of hope. "Maybe they can help us," I insisted. I had to try something. I was tired of running. But before I could make a move, the masked figure lunged again, closing the distance with shocking speed. That's when I saw it, a glimmer of metal reflecting in the moonlight, and I realized we weren't the only ones being hunted. Panic surged through me as I turned back to the celebration, an idea triggering in my mind. If the music drowned out the chase, we might just slip through unseen. I yelled, "Run!" and we sprinted toward the crowd, fear propelling us forward, our only hope dancing away into the night. The music blared as we bolted toward the crowd, a chaotic mix of laughter and cheers. My heart raced, not just from fear but from the thrill of trying to blend in. The masked figure was closing in, yet the people around us were oblivious, lost in their celebrations. "Keep moving," the girl whispered, gripping my arm tightly. We pushed through the throng of bodies, the rhythm of the music pounding in my ears. I stole glances behind us, expecting to see the figure at any moment, but he vanished amidst the dancers. I turned back to the girl. "Do you see him?" "No, but we can't stop. Just keep going," she urged, leading us toward a cluster of people swaying near a flickering bonfire. The warmth touched my skin, a sensation I craved in the midst of the night's chaos. Suddenly, someone bumped into me, almost knocking me over. "Watch it," they shouted, clearly annoyed. Their face was flushed with excitement, and for a split second, I envied their carefree existence. "We need to," I started, but the girl interrupted. "Over there, the building." She pointed to a low brick structure at the edge of the courtyard, partially obscured by the shadows of the trees. I nodded, understanding her plan. "We can hide there." We rushed toward the building, weaving through the crowd. A thought nagged at me. What if the masked figure caught up? I didn't want to drag anyone else into this nightmare. As we approached the door, I heard a shout behind us. "There they are." The voice was familiar, rough like gravel. My blood ran cold as I recognized it as one of the voices chasing us. "Get in," the girl urged, shoving the heavy door open. We stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind us. The lack of light made it hard to see, but I could make out the outline of the room. It looked empty but for a few scattered chairs and an old table. A faint stench like mildew lingered in the air. I pressed against the door, listening for footsteps outside. "Do you think they saw us?" I whispered, breathing heavily. "Maybe. But they'll check the courtyard first." Her voice trembled. "We need to find a way out of here." I nodded, trying to shake the panic clouding my mind. "What about windows?" "Let me see." She took a cautious step deeper into the room, searching in the darkness. As she moved, I turned my attention back to the door, straining to catch any sounds from outside. Then I heard it again, a low sound, barely a whisper. "I found something." The girl's voice rang out from the shadows. My heart leapt as I moved toward her. But then her voice shifted. "Wait. What's this?" I felt a rush of dread, my instincts screaming that we weren't alone. I stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. In front of her was a small trapdoor, barely visible in the floorboards. "That wasn't here before," I said, my unease growing. She knelt down, her fingers brushing the edges of the door. "I don't know, but we have to get out of here." A loud crash echoed from the courtyard, making us both jump. The moment froze. A decision loomed before us. Would we venture into the darkness below, or risk being caught above? I could feel the weight of the choice pressing down. "What if it's a trap?" I whispered, the fear tightening my chest. "Then we'll figure it out," she replied, determination cutting through her uncertainty. Before I could respond, she lifted the trapdoor, revealing a dark tunnel below. The smell of damp earth wafted up, tinged with something metallic. "Let's go," she urged, the urgency in her voice igniting a spark of courage. With a final glance back at the door, I clutched her hand and jumped down into the unknown, our only hope buried in the darkness. The moment we landed, the darkness closed in around us like a heavy blanket. I stumbled slightly but steadied myself as I realized the tunnel was dirt-floored and narrow, barely wide enough for us to walk side by side. I could hear the faint sound of water dripping somewhere deeper in the passage. "Can you see anything?" I whispered, pressing my back against the cold, damp wall. It felt like it was closing in with every heartbeat. "Not yet," she replied, her voice barely above a murmur. She pulled out her phone and flicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a winding pathway. The walls were lined with rough stone and dirt, giving it a claustrophobic vibe. We took a few cautious steps forward, the air growing cooler and more musty. "Do you think they'll find us?" I asked, my voice shaky. "If they're still up there, they won't follow us down here," she assured me, but there was a hint of doubt in her tone. "They might try to block off the entrance, though." I felt my pulse quicken at the thought. "Then we need to keep moving." We ventured deeper into the tunnel, the light from her phone illuminating patches of moisture on the walls. The whispers of our footsteps echoed around us. I forced myself to focus on that sound, trying to drown out the image of the masked figure chasing after us. Suddenly the tunnel widened into a small chamber. The walls were etched with strange symbols that twisted and turned like a language I couldn't understand. A chill raced down my spine. "What is this place?" I asked, pulling back. "I don't know," she replied, her voice thick with tension. "But it's not good." I stepped closer to examine the symbols. They looked ancient, almost ominous. Then I noticed something sparkling on the ground, a silver locket, half buried in the dirt. "Look at this," I said, picking it up. It felt heavy in my palm like it held secrets. I flicked it open, revealing a small picture of a girl, smiling, with dark hair. "This must belong to someone." "That's creepy," she said, stepping back. "It could help us figure out what this place is." But as I stared at the locket, unease wrapped its cold fingers around my heart. Why would something like this be hidden down here? Just then a loud noise echoed from behind us, the sound of footsteps, hurried and heavy. My stomach dropped. "They're coming," I shouted. "We need to hide," she urged, glancing at the darkness around us. I quickly shoved the locket into my pocket and looked around. "Over there!" I pointed to a narrow crevice in the wall. It looked like a small alcove that would fit just the two of us. We dashed over and squeezed ourselves inside, holding our breaths as the footsteps approached. The footsteps grew louder, making my heart race even faster. I felt her trembling beside me, and I grasped her hand, trying to convey strength. As the footsteps halted, the air grew thick with tension. All I could hear was the sound of our quickening breaths and the irregular thud of my heart against my chest. Then everything went still. If we were caught now, there would be no place to run. It felt like time stretched on forever. I peeked out just enough to see shadowy figures moving in the glowing light from above, their features obscured, but their voices. I recognized the rough graveliness of one of them. "They went down here," he said, the familiarity of his tone sending ice through my veins. My mind raced. We were trapped, and there was no easy way out. The locket felt heavy in my pocket, pressing into my thigh like a warning. That's when I realized, whatever mystery this tunnel held, it was about to pull us deeper into its darkness. The stillness broke with a scuffling sound. My stomach churned as I strained to hear. The shadowed figures were speaking again, their voices low and conspiratorial. "Check over there, we need to find them before they go too far," one of them urged. My breath caught in my throat. They were searching for us, hunting us like prey. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I could feel the panic radiating from her. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but I wasn't sure myself. "Stay quiet," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wished I could do more, but our safety depended on silence. The locket felt hot against my leg, as if warning me again. Suddenly, the light from their flashlights danced over our hiding spot. I froze, pulling her closer against the wall. Would they see us? My heart thundered in my chest, but the darkness sheltered us. "What if they went further in?" another voice asked, sounding frustrated. "They didn't have time," the first voice replied. "This is the last place to check." A sudden beam of light flared up, and for one harrowing moment, I thought it would land on us. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't notice the alcove. Then, just as quickly, they moved past us, their silhouettes swallowed by darkness as they ventured deeper into the tunnel. I waited a beat, then exhaled slowly. "We need to go. Now," she nodded, and we slipped out of the alcove, pressing ourselves against the wall to avoid any stray light. I led the way, careful to keep the beam of her phone low and focused. As we moved through the tunnel, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. something lurking just beyond the reach of our light. The passage twisted and turned, and the symbols on the walls grew more intricate as we moved deeper. I tried to decode them, but they seemed unrecognizable. Were they warnings? Or perhaps a history best left forgotten? Then, I stumbled over something on the ground. The beam of light flicked down to reveal a tattered piece of cloth. It was familiar. My heart dropped. It looked like part of a costume I had seen at the Halloween party. "Is that?" she started, but I interrupted her. "We can't stop. We need to keep moving," I urged, a knot tightening in my stomach. The implications of finding it here felt too real, too close. We pressed on, moving further from the entrance. The air grew heavier, and I could hear the distant echo of dripping water, but now it sounded like laughter against the stone. My heartbeat quickened again. This was wrong. There was something evil about this place, and I felt a growing need to escape. But before I could voice my concern, the tunnel widened again, revealing a large, dark chamber ahead. My breath hitched. In the center of the chamber stood an altar, and that too was covered with symbols. It was like something out of a horror movie. Unearthly, uninviting. "That can't be good," she said, and it was an understatement. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity pulled me closer. Then I spotted something on the altar. Something shiny. That's when the footsteps echoed back toward us, this time accompanied by a low chant. My heart sank even further. We weren't just running from someone, we were stumbling into something. I grabbed her hand, ready to pull her back, but it was too late. The light from the chamber flickered, and just like that, the darkness reached out to us once more. I stumbled backward, dragging the girl with me as the soft chant swelled in volume, echoing through the chamber. I was paralyzed with fear, drawn to the altar where a shimmering object lay, pulsing with an eerie light. It was like nothing I had seen before, and a part of me knew I shouldn't be captivated by it. "Let's go," she hissed urgently, yanking me away from the altar's lure. My pulse raced as I turned to escape, but the distant footsteps had escalated into an ominous thrumming, vibrating through the ground. My thoughts raced along with my heart. It felt like they were drawing closer. We dashed back the way we came, but soon realized that the previously twisting tunnel had morphed. The pathway was vibrating with an energy that felt unnatural, as though the very walls were alive and shifting. "We have to find the exit," I gasped, adrenaline spilling through my every nerve. Her flashlight flickered and my stomach dropped. "No, no, no," I muttered, panic twisting in my gut. The shadows began to creep in on us again, and the low chant from the altar morphed into a cacophony of whispers that mingled with our footsteps, growing louder and more insistent. We pressed on, desperation fueling our speed. As we turned corner after corner, every shadow seemed to loom larger. Every whisper felt like fingers scraping at the back of my mind. What was happening in this tunnel? Then, we reached a fork in the tunnel, and I felt an instinct draw me toward the right path. "This way," I beckoned. She followed without hesitation, trusting my urgency. Suddenly we burst into another open chamber, but the atmosphere was different. The air felt thick with silent anticipation rather than foreboding. The room was filled with faintly glowing stones embedded in the ground, casting an ethereal blue light across the walls. It felt like a sanctuary, but that only muted my fear momentarily. "Look," she pointed, and my eyes locked onto a passageway at the far end bathed in a bright light. Hope surged in me like a tide. "We have to go," I urged her, and we hurtled toward the light, praying it would lead us to safety. As we neared the opening, I heard it again, the footsteps and the chant. They were behind us, closing in. I dared a glance over my shoulder, but could see nothing in the enveloping dark. "Don't look back, just run," she shouted. My mind raced with the implications of what we were leaving behind. What was in those shadows? I had to survive. I had to escape this nightmare. We leapt through the passageway and found ourselves in another narrow corridor, light illuminating the walls like a warm embrace. It felt safer, but I couldn't shake a feeling of dread that lingered. Then we came across a door, weathered and ancient with markings identical to those I had glimpsed earlier. "This must lead out," I said, grasping the handle. But before I could open it, I heard a deafening thud behind us. "Emma!" The voice pierced through the chaos. I shuddered to see the figure of the older man from the party emerge into the corridor, his presence imposing. "You have to leave now." My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean? Who are you?" "Please, you don't understand. You're entwined in this. Just go. You must find the light before it's too late." His eyes were wide, filled with urgency. The chants grew louder behind us, and the imposing energy moved closer. "What if they—" I began, but I was cut off by the sound of the door rattling behind us. "Go!" he bellowed, and the command felt like a jolt of electricity. Without another thought, I turned the handle, yanking the door open before rushing inside, dragging the girl with me. As we stepped through, the door slammed shut behind us with a thunderous boom. It felt like the tension of the prior corridor released in an instant. I leaned against the door, gasping. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced with confusion. We were in a room filled with daylight, sunlight pouring through the expansive windows, but the air was heavy with an indescribable weight. The walls were adorned with photographs of past celebrations, and the laughter I had heard before echoed faintly in this hollowed space. The party? What happened? She looked around, bewildered. Are we safe? I wanted to say yes, but my heart clenched in uncertainty. The laughter faded outside as I recalled the bracelets, the costumes, the history that felt embedded in this place. I don't know, I admitted. We stepped further into the room. In the corner, a pile of clothes lay heaped on the floor. I recognized it as part of the costumes from the party. A sense of unease curled in my stomach as I approached, the truth dawning on me. Before I could voice my dread, the sunlight shifted, casting a shadow that danced like silhouettes across the walls. Was there still something lurking in the dark? "Emma, I sense," she began, but her voice faded as we both turned to the window, drawn to the scene below. The revelry of the party continued unabated even though we had escaped. Only something was different. It felt wrong. We were outside it all, yet completely trapped, and I knew the truth would never fully escape those grasping shadows. Just like that, the laughter echoed again, creeping into my mind, resonating with the dark whisper I had heard before. What had I truly escaped? Even in the light, a haunting uncertainty lingered as we left the window behind. I glanced back once more, but the light felt dimmer. What if this isn't over? I murmured. And the shadows shifted just the same, leaving questions lingering in the air. I didn't know if I had truly escaped, or if I had just walked into another chapter of the unknown.